121st Contact, Saturday, March 24, 1979, 1:40 p.m., pages 350, 365. Billy says that once again lasted rather long, you black rose among the star children. Manara says you are very kind. Billy says what do you mean? When I but see you in such a way, then I can only be kind to you. You know, I had to call for quite a long time, before you finally gave just an answer, and then, it took about another week before you could finally come. I also continuously tried during the last few weeks to take up contact with Quetzal, Patar, and Semyaza, which once again failed completely for me, unfortunately. It seems to me, by the complete silence, just as if the three would be absent in some other dimension outside of my calling ability. Can you tell me more details about that? Manara says I can do that, Semyaza, and you need not be worried about her, for there is no reason at all for that. She is present in the Dal universe. First in 3 months, so at the end of the month of June, she will be back. This also applies to Patai and Quetzal, who accompany Semyaza, as well as her sister, Plejaren. Unfortunately, Semyaza has suffered damage of an illness-related form, which is associated with her previous accident, which happened there in your center. Billy says, but why is that? Because we were told that everything was in the best order. It also seemed to me that her state of health was rather good. Manara says she also had no problems until the date of the 26th of February. But on this day, she personally carried out a very important analysis for the first time, in whose course and result she got so worked up that her artificial brain mass that was still in transition produced dangerous changes, through which she fell into a deep coma. The only possibility left for us was to bring her immediately to ask its people in the Dal universe, where she is now being brought back to good health by the same scientists who treated Semyaza before. In the meantime, it is already very good with her again, but now, it is being tried to transform the artificial brain convolutions in a very short time through certain procedures and innovations, after which such incidents should not appear anymore. The attempts for this plan are still ongoing, but these should be completed and finished in the course of next week, after which then the actual transformation treatment will be carried out, which should take about 2 months. Billy says, man, girl, we should already be so far here on the earth. But tell me, why has the girl since gone mad? And is she really well? Manara says her well-being is really good, and no complications have appeared. The reasons for the illness, however, lie in matters that I must explain to you in rather unpleasant contexts, which is also why I came here, because I have to do this whether I want to now or not. Billy says, what, then, do you have in stock? Manara says I must explain it to you, and I also must tell you that I am here in representation of Quetzal, who is absent. Billy says then you are, so to speak, the station boss. Manara says as you state, yes. Billy says fine, then fire away at once, your speech certainly won't bring something pleasant, as I infer from your words. Manara says with which you think quite right, unfortunately. Billy says if only I had been mistaken. Manara says I can empathize with your desire, but I cannot do otherwise and must fulfill my duty, even though this is probably more difficult for me than anything else before in my life. The things that I must announce to you are that the contacts will now be finally terminated, as was predetermined by a decision that if up to the beginning of the month of March, 1979, no decisive changes will arise in the behavior and actions as well as in the entire individual guidance and organization of the group members. What we hoped for has not arisen, unfortunately, because with various members of the group, no changes have been made in any form, even though this was presented differently on the outside by them. Truly, they put on a very regrettable show, by what means they hope to deceive us and also you, which is naturally denied by them, however, which is why you also shouldn't address these things with them. In contrast to these, others have, indeed, striven for a necessary change, but in a framework too small to be able to be taken into account for a preservation of the contacts and the continuation of the mission. So there truthfully remain only very few members who can be counted on a single hand, whose effort was such that it can be considered as good grounds. But since the negatives are predominant, I, in representation of Quetzal, may not take responsibility for allowing the contacts to continue to exist, for in this respect, I have very precise instructions, which I cannot get around in any way. At the same time, unfortunately, I also have to include you in the range of those who have not truly striven for the continued existence of the contacts and for the fulfillment of the mission, because the monitoring recordings have clearly shown that you acted against Quetzal's specific instructions, which you know very well. So namely, in the case of Herbert, you, on behalf of the group, arbitrarily freed him from his financial obligation, even though Quetzal clearly determined that also Herbert was to be incorporated into his financial obligation to the group and, with that, also to the mission, as he can actually meet this obligation in truth, if he only wants. You should not have taken this arbitrary disregard of Quetzal's instruction upon yourself, you just shouldn't have. It must also be charged to you, however, that you evidently haven't informed the group members enough in reference to what was expected in connection with the contacts and the changes of the group members, if these changes weren't brought about in a decisive form, and indeed, within the given time up to the beginning of the month of March. But not only you seriously violated Quetzal's determinations, as you recognize now, but also the group member Madeline and Jacobus in particular. Madeline, if she would have thought about herself, would have had to recognize that she has to change in various things. Particularly, it occurs with her that she extremely diminishes in reference to the daily works to be done in the center and is even ill-tempered about these and averse to these. But also in complying with the rules of regulation, very many points are open with her, which she follows in no way. So she lets it happen that she often sees things with other group members, but also with the children, in order then to present these in a childish manner to some other group member in a treacherous form, even though she has to take no notice at all of the objectionable matters. Her behavior and conduct relating to this are built on betrayal, resentment and, in a certain sense, on jealousy and egoism. Also towards your wedded wife, she does not behave in the manner that is clearly and plainly given by the rules of regulation and that must be followed. In reference to the work itself, she is completely disinterested and so averse that she looks for any smallest opportunity to keep herself away from it, whereby even pretenses of illness come to light, even though the sufferings are absent or are only of very little significance. Most severely objectionable are also her down teams in the Saha Center, where she hardly tries to make progress and very often only uses the site as a place of rest, so she sometimes only makes extremely minimal or no progress at all. As for Jacobus, it is to be objected in severe measure that he gives very little thought to his duty regarding the time compliance for the introduction of practitioners in the Saha Center, whereby very grossly negligent time shifts appear. But this also applies to his own meditative exercises in the center, which he neglects very much, which is also the case with your wife, who also leaves her appointed times unused, like Jacobus, who also very incorrectly places himself outside the rules in various other things. So according to the recordings, it arose recently that with regard to the treatment and order towards your wife and your children, he again places himself into things in such a way that he insults them and threatens them, even though he was very clearly oriented by Quetzal and Semyaza about the fact that he has to interfere in these matters just as little as also any other group member. On the other hand, in our view, the three children behave and develop, at least for the moment, exactly according to our conceptions and our hope, so at the given point in time, they would have become able to take over and carry out their tasks if the final termination of the contacts wouldn't have appeared, whereby everything is eliminated. However, it should be noted with this that in all three children, The thorn of damage has already been incurred, which could have expanded over time to possible danger if we had pursued our task even further. This is so, because through the manner of Jacobus and your wife, things began to change in the children, which are of a rather negative value. Also Madeline contributed her part to it, as she, too, could not refrain from interfering in the affairs of the children. Also with Elsie, various things are to be objected, particularly those things, for which Pata, Quetzal and, indeed, even Semyaza already had to reprimand her several times before. But not least, I myself must say to this that she has a very special way of getting stuck on something with stubbornness bordering on hard-headedness, even though she knows perfectly well that she only provokes strife or outbursts of anger thereby. The fact that she then still speaks of a so-called hope up to the last moment, or of the fact that she is rightful in her thinking and acting, only testifies of pure irrationality, as well as of the fact that she simply does not want to accept the truth that is very well known to her. The major evil of the whole thing is that most group members continuously object to our determinations and regulatory instructions, etc., and due to the irrationality of the group members concerned, it is even maintained in their faint-hearted lack of understanding and wanting to be of understanding fuss that we are unjust and act unjustly, as was the case, for example, in reference to H.S., because we would not eliminate his spirit form in a natural way, as a result of malicious betrayal and destructiveness in relation to the mission. Whoever calls out such statements and demands, however, has certainly not yet fully grasped the true meaning of our mission, and these are, unfortunately, several group members. And what all this has led to now, this proved itself clearly and plainly in the month of February, when Semyaza collapsed, and all that just because she had to convince herself, through her own analysis of the incomprehensible, limitless, treacherous, and unreasonable stubbornness and the equally limitless egoism of H.S., that he wants to be of no sense at all to follow the arrangements of Quetzal. She also saw from the analyses, however, that also the break of contacts had to result for you and the group, which she herself was not able to bear any more. These are the reasons for the fact that everything has now found a final end and that there can no longer be a continuation of our contacts. If at least only a single major change or a single determining fulfillment of duty would have appeared for all group members, then I myself would have been able to take responsibility for granting you all one last time period, at least until the return of Semyaza, Pata, and Quetzal, which very well would have meant a true battle for me, however, in reference to a request and an intercession for you all. But as the things are now, no possibility whatsoever is given to me. That's how the things are now, unfortunately. Billy says. Manara says you are silent. Billy says, what am I supposed to say to that? I myself know really well enough that every single one of your words corresponds to the truth and that you still haven't mentioned everything that would be objectionable. Manara says you speak very correctly and in accordance with a very good overview of all concerns. But since that is so, I cannot understand that you, too, have broken Quetzal's determinations. Just why did you do that? It is simply incomprehensible to me. Billy says yes, you said something just now about Elsie, that she preserves wrong hopes to the end against better knowledge, which are, nevertheless, truly no hopes but rather only a stubbornness bordering on hard-headedness. I think that I am probably sick at the same place, for I hope that through my actions the group members concerned would, nevertheless, still do the right thing by themselves, if one granted them enough time. I now know that this was wrong and that I have also messed things up. On the other hand, I also know very well that there must be a limit somewhere and that one may not just constantly show consideration where none is appropriate. Manara says your words are honest, and on the other hand, I actually should have known that. It is, indeed, well known to us that you always grant everyone another chance, whenever this is possible for you at all. But that has nothing to do with false hopes against better knowledge, as is the case with Elsie. Nevertheless, you should not have done this right at the present time, but should have correctly complied with Quetzal's determinations, for you knew very well what effects any wrong action would bring. Billy says, you are right, I know that only too well, but if you stood in my place, then you certainly would have also acted in such a way. Meier says, I won't deny that, but it is still doubtful. Billy says, of course, it cannot be denied. Certainly, it is also true that I have simply become tired of constantly making the same speeches without success and stopping various group members over and over again, in order to have them reflect at last and act in accordance with what should be. One can hold that against me, that's right. But for once, I am also at the end, which is why I can't even be angry now about the fact that everything is now over. If I want to be honest, then I even must say that I'm kind of relieved, because the whole drama is finally over. Meier says, you are resigned and exhausted, which isn't surprising, however. You had to bear and carry out very much more in the last 2 years than what another human being of Earth would have ever been able to bear. Someone else in your place would have almost certainly collapsed already after the first 3 months and would have had to give up. Billy says, it probably wasn't that bad, but it was hard, that's right. Meier says, my words correspond to the truth. For your own person, you only see all things according to your own values, which is why you also always demand so very much of yourself, which certainly wouldn't be possible, however, for another human being. Billy says, you exaggerate just like Meier. But that now doesn't matter anymore, for after all, it is all over. There is now nothing else left than to say goodbye and to let ourselves go our separate ways. So farewell, Black Rose, and please don't be angry with me that I have failed. It just had to come so far sometime, because with the human beings of Earth, who bear their responsibility themselves under no circumstances and who always want to know everything better in their damned logic, with these, such a difficult mission probably cannot be carried out. Meier says, how much your words correspond to the truth, this only now becomes conscious to me very painfully. And how much deep pain also surges in you, this. Billy says, leave it, please, because now is not the time to state even these things. It would only bring us both into difficulties. Therefore, let's leave these things. Let's simply go our separate ways, but we can still think of each other in friendship, so I think. Meier says, that will, unfortunately, be the only thing that we still have left, because after Quetzal's return, we will leave the Earth and will not return. Billy says, so then, I can't even say goodbye once more to Patar, Meier, or Quetzal? Meier says, they will not grant themselves this difficult hour and, with certainty, won't still visit you one last time. Oh, if only I could still change everything, it is really. Billy says, man, girl, leave it, please. With whines, you only make everything even worse. Farewell, and don't be, damn, farewell. Meier says, my friend, Billy, don't be frightened, it is I, Meier. Billy says, from where do you come? Meier says, I just couldn't leave after your departure, so I followed you and have been watching you now for 20 minutes, as you sit here and ponder. Billy says, however, you would have better flown back to the station, because now the farewell only begins in such a way again. Why must you make everything even more difficult? Meier says, I am so very sorry about everything, and your sadness hurts me very much, which is why I don't want to let you go in such a way as you took leave. Billy says, but I cannot help it. Meier says, you violate your feelings. Please understand that I can't simply leave in such a way, when I know that you are grieving and that you are in despair. Understand that I feel very deep love for you and that you are like a brother to me, as this also occurs with Meier and Plejaren as well as Quetzal and Patar. It's just that we female beings connect everything with even deeper feelings than what Quetzal and Patar do. And I know very well that even you are connected to our relevant forms, which is why I am very well oriented about how terribly everything in you is in turmoil. Billy says, I know, you are right, but one must also deal with the hell of this damned kind, whether one wants to now or not. But you know, somehow, I came to the contact today with high hopes, because I thought that it would at least be considered that on March 3rd, for the first time, the whole group acted uniformly and in complete unity together, in accordance with one of Quetzal's determinations. I thought that at least this would help to make it clear to you all that hope is not lost and that all group members are slowly starting to take their duty seriously and are also willing to slowly bear the responsibility themselves. Meier says, I don't understand. Billy says, but you must understand this, nevertheless, because you have, indeed, carried out continuous inspections for several months, according to which, as far as I know, every single word spoken by us and all thoughts and actions, etc. must be registered. Meier says that corresponds to the correctness, but I still don't understand the sense of your words. Billy says, now tell me that you actually know nothing about it. Meier says, I really don't understand a word of your speech. Billy says, on March 3rd, at midnight, the time period had expired for HS, right? Meier says that corresponds to the truth, to the extent that the time limit was until 9:00 p.m., yes. But what do you want to suggest with that? Billy says Quetzal determined that H would have to be excluded from the core group by a unanimous agreement of the group if he wouldn't fit himself into Quetzal's determinations for his own improving, right? Meier says that's right. Continue. Billy says, now, it should be known to you through the recordings, nevertheless, that H was excluded, by a uniform action of the group, in writing and correctly, from the core group and from all matters surrounding the entire task. And in addition, I thought that this action, even if it is truly the first compliance with the determination, that this should still be sufficient to let you recognize that the group has now finally come so far and is trying hard to bear their responsibility themselves and to fulfill their duty. Meier says that was actually done. Billy says, but of course, which you should know, nevertheless, on the basis of your recordings. It must also be shown from these that in this regard, I also held to my given word and didn't say a word to H about what would await him if he would drop out. So he still doesn't know that through his exclusion, his consciousness form becomes freed, through a natural departure of all real knowledge that he gained through us, and that he will change back over the course of about 15 years, in order to be freed from his existence with regard to the truth. All of this should be, at least, so I hoped, a reason for the fact that our goodwill becomes recognized, or that more precisely, our goodwill becomes recognized by you all and is accordingly evaluated in our favor. Meier says if that is truly so, then this will be a very good reason for maintaining the contacts. Billy says, do you doubt my words? Meier says, no, I truly don't, but I knew nothing about that, which I don't understand again, because the recordings would have had to tell me these things, which they did not do, however. Billy says, what are the recordings stored on? Meier says they are very small electronic storage disks the size of a normal female thumbnail. Billy says, aha, and you couldn't have lost such a storage element? Meier says, no, with absolute certainty not. There would only be the possibility that one of the elements would be defective, by what means recordings would be missing. I will immediately let it be checked. Wait a few minutes, I'll immediately give the instruction, so that the things are checked in the station. Meier speaks with someone by means of a kind of video device, with a man unknown to me. So, now we will know in a few seconds whether any of the storage elements, yes, here comes the answer already. One moment. Meier listens intently to the man's voice, which explains some things to her. Yes, you were right with your assumption that something was lost, but it wasn't a storage element but rather a microscopically small connecting piece between two tiny storage cells, by what means the recordings were not played. They were recorded, however, and thus, I know the data now. I am sorry that this misfortune has happened to me. Somehow, I must have damaged the element during a manipulation. The stored data, however, clearly confirm your words, so of course, everything looks a little different than what I said to you. After these recordings, your hopes also very clearly find authorization, which must be considered by us, in any case. As you said, the action in the case of H was uniformly carried out by all group members as this corresponded to Quetzal's arrangement. But this is, in fact, also the very first action followed in a correct form, which also indicates, however, that there is truly an interest for a decisive change of the group members from these themselves. As representative of Quetzal, this entitles me to act in accordance with your hopes and to give you the promise that the contacts are not to be interrupted, at least not for the time being, so therefore, at least a further time period arises, which serves for the continued existence of everything, if it now truly progresses in the form and becomes worked in every respect, as this was done through the correct exclusion of H by the totality of the group members. In accordance with the recordings, however, I cannot help but state certain criticisms for those who found the exclusion to be unjust and unnecessary, despite their confirmations and acknowledgments. In particular, I must, in this respect, give a strong reprimand to your wife, whose relevant behavior speaks completely contrary to her development, which she has apparently worked out in herself in recent months. In the special, I also cannot help but put Elsie in her place harshly, because in accordance with her unreasonable doing, it was only 10 minutes before the appointed time, before the action was carried out. So not very much time was left before the destruction of all things, for I had the instruction to pay attention to extreme punctuality in all things, which I, therefore, must also do in this case. With regard to this, the recordings now show that the time was only kept because of your determined and unyielding presence, even though you were mistaken about the acceptance of time. The recordings show here that you had to rebuke and ask Elsie repeatedly before she attended to her duty, which, unfortunately, speaks much to her disfavor. Her frequent obstinacy and stubbornness bordering on hard-headedness truly doesn't exactly point to a great rationality and inclusion in certain things, if these cannot be integrated into her thoughts and aspirations. Look here, these are her words, if you can decipher the symbols, and these characters here are the recordings of her true thinking and the unconscious. You can recognize from this that she acts against better knowledge but, according to these characters here, denies this on the outside and surrounds it with another mantle, which does not correspond to the truth. Look here, these distinct symbols testify of an uncontrolled pig-headedness and hard-headedness, which exist to such an extent that one must speak of a stubbornness. But now, my dear friend, be reassured, because despite these things that have happened, the entire action entitles me to give you all at least so long a time until Quetzal returns. But if everything is to continue at that point in time, then it is necessary that the changes and actions continue and progress for the better with all group members, so that the brought about action doesn't remain the only one. As I am responsible for the things of Quetzal, this lets my concern be calm, whereby I give you my word that I will turn everything to the best, just making sure, however, that all the things of the group members now proceed in the right direction, as this must be. But my effort should also just be to make sure that each individual group member becomes excluded immediately and irrevocably by all of the group members if he or she rebels even only in the slightest form against the already existing rules of regulation and determinations or simply ignores them and does not follow them. At the same time, the same form with the same consequences shall apply to everyone uniformly, as this has become the case with HS. For this reason, I have to give some or certain group members some rules of conduct, according to which they must resolve a number of points of deficiency in a very quick manner, if they don't want to be excluded, at the latest, at Quetzal's return by his determination or even by my determination and at an earlier point in time. At the same time, unfortunately, I cannot get around mentioning the relevant group members by name, which will again lead to the fact that those concerned will feel unjustly criticized, which happens against their better knowledge, however. Therefore, they all must learn very quickly in this respect to recognize themselves in honesty and to recognize the mistakes shown to them as such and to change these for the better. It must also finally come to an end that out of unreason, illogic, and lack of understanding, certain pointings out of errors, objections, and determinations of various group members are discriminated against and are dismissed as illogical, just because their possibilities of processing, registering, and understanding are not yet developed so far that they have an overview of these. In particular, this applies to the group members Jacobus, Elsie, Herbert, and Guido. With Engelbert, the things are such that he often considers different things too little before he reaches a decision, so it happens that he forms a view or opinion, which he must then revise again, once you clarify the concerns. Also in his consequence, he isn't stable enough when it concerns issues with which he must give instructions to other group members. His ability of getting through and his determination must become of a much better form in this respect. For Herbert, I must set a final time period during which he still has time to adapt himself into everything at last and also to meet his financial obligations, with which he now finally has to begin this month. If he does not honor his financial obligation, and indeed already starting from the month of April, then by the whole group, the exclusion from the same is to be given to him. It must be like that because all group members go on the same track and have the same obligations. So for Herbert, 150 francs are set for 1 month, an amount that can very well be applied by him, if he only wants. It just isn't right that he only wants to be a beneficiary, without wanting to take on any obligations, through which the others get in need. With K, the case is such that now at last, he is also to adapt himself into the entire given order of all rules and determinations, and is to endeavor himself in a very special measure around the teaching and around its appropriation. For the next 2 years, no exceptions at all can be made valid for him and with him anymore. However, also no walkouts at all can be considered with him anymore. Like every other group member, he has to use the Saha Center twice a month and also has to appear regularly at the 2 fixed meetings of the internal group. I can grant him a training period relating to this up to Quetzal's return. The same time limit is set for Madeline, otherwise, she, too, must be subject to an exclusion. The objectionable concerns with her were already mentioned by me, but I must still suggest to her that she may no longer interfere in any way in the affairs of your and your wife's children, and she also has to refrain from inflicting pain on them through lashes. But in particular, she is to make sure that she fixes her childish behavior of next week, after which then the actual transformation treatment will be carried out, which should take about 2 months. Billy says, man, girl, we should already be so far here on the earth. But tell me, why has the girl since gone mad? And is she really well? Meier says her well-being is really good, and no complications have appeared. The reasons for the illness, however, lie in matters that I must explain to you in rather unpleasant contexts, which is also why I came here, because I have to do this whether I want to now or not. Billy's 121st contact, Saturday, March 24, 1979, 1:40 p.m., pages 350, 365. Billy says that once again lasted rather long, you black rose among the star children. Meier says you are very kind. Billy says, what do you mean? When I but see you in such a way, then I can only be kind to you. You know, I had to call for quite a long time, before you finally gave just an answer, and then, it took about another week before you could finally come. I also continue still in transition produced dangerous changes, through which she fell into a deep coma. The only possibility left for us was to bring her immediately to ask its people in the DAL universe, where she is now being brought back to good health by the same scientists who treated Semyaza before. In the meantime, it is already very good with her again, but now, it is being tried to transform the artificial brain convolutions in a very short time through certain procedures and innovations, after which such incidents should not appear anymore. The attempts for this plan are still ongoing, but these should be completed and finished in the course. Wesley tried during the last few weeks to take up contact with Quetzal, Patar, and Semyaza, which once again failed completely for me, unfortunately. It seems to me, by the complete silence, just as if the three would be absent in some other dimension outside of my calling ability. Can you tell me more details about that? Meier says I can do that, Semyaza, and you need not be worried about her, for there is no reason at all for that. She is present in the Dal universe. First in 3 months, so at the end of the month of June, she will be back. This also applies to Patar and Quetzal, who accompany Semyaza, as well as her sister, Plejaren. Unfortunately, Semyaza has suffered damage of an illness-related form, which is associated with her previous accident, which happened to her in your center. Billy says, but why is that? Because we were told that everything was in the best order. It also seemed to me that her state of health was rather good. Meier says she also had no problems until the date of the 26th of February. But on this day, she personally carried out a very important analysis for the first time, in whose course and result she got so worked up that her artificial brain mass, the